I'd like to call this meeting to order. First item, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following. Section 2.23711, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, discipline, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. Under that, we'll be talking about the Local Workforce Investment Board. 3, discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose or the disposition of publicly held real property where a discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. 1, former Blacksburg Middle School property. Do I have a motion, please?
Motion. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
We're in closed meeting. Need a motion to go out of closed meeting.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to go out of closed meeting. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia, hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for the certification by closed meeting. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye. Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
The next item on our agenda is our invocation. This is where the board observes a moment of silence to reflect on the business at hand. And also, after we observe that moment of silence, we'll be led in the pledge by Mr. Meadows, our county administrator.
Let us pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
I say good evening and welcome to our board meeting for May the 11th. First item of business will be a presentation on the Virginia Tech Montgomery Regional Airport Authority, and Michael St. Jean, the Executive Director, will provide an update on the Virginia Tech Montgomery Regional Airport. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, good evening. How are you all?
Good.
I say you all, which is unusual for me. I spent last weekend in Rhode Island, and although I've lived in Virginia for 33 years, if my cadence really speeds up and I say ka and pop, please forgive me. It just kind of slides out pretty much. I'm looking forward to making this presentation to you this evening. I think the last time I was here was a couple of years ago. And the Airport Authority was created 13 years ago, and we've been dealing with planning and planning and planning for 13 years, and we are at the cusp at this particular time to begin many, many projects that are about to come to fruition. I need my glasses. The Airport Authority, and I start the usual first 3 or 4 slides the same way. Most of the people are not aware of the entities that do create the Airport Authority, which is Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Montgomery County, and Virginia Tech. Ms. Perkins, of course, represents Montgomery County. Instead of reading all of this, I'm going to hit a couple of highlights, but if you'll notice, the one that I really pointed out is obtaining grants. And the key here to us is, and this is the legislative mission created in 2001, servicing corporate executive markets and other general aviation markets, obtaining grants, loans, and other funding, and AIP is airport improvement money. These are FAA funds, and in promoting and assisting in regional economic development. And this is a key in this thing to this presentation, that this theme is going to repeat itself throughout the presentation. We also created a vision statement, and instead of me reading through all of it, just take a moment. A community that does have pride, envisions becoming a hub for corporate executive aviation, providing access to education, high-tech industry, maintaining a close relationship with residential users. Many of the things that we do is reach out to the people who live north of the airport and the surrounding communities, such as Airport Acres or the Cedar Run neighborhood. Visiting, going door to door if they have any issues, or keeping the door open in my office, and responding to concerns that these people have. Actually, we have a piece of property that's outside the airport perimeter fence, and I allow the people in Airport Acres to use that as a community garden. And so that type of relationship, and they provide, there's a quid pro quo there, and what I mean is that those people watch the airport from the yards. And so it provides an unofficial security system that we have over there. And so if anybody sees anything unusual, they call me in my office. So there's a nice relationship that has been built over the years. And if they have any concerns, we address it immediately. So that's what I mean by relationship with residential users. And the bottom line is that our goal is to be financially self-sufficient while providing a vital transportation link. And you will see in a few moments how we get there. This is the community's front door. This is the main street to Montgomery County, Virginia Tech, Christiansburg, and Blacksburg. And it is, and Dave, I think back here, Clark can attest to this, this is arguably the most complex piece of transportation infrastructure in this community. It is a capital asset, and able to import, export ideas, goods, service, research, and development. And you're going to see why it's a complex infrastructure. These are some of the coordinating agencies that I deal with. The Federal Aviation Administration, the first one, actually has about 10 different groups. And sometimes they don't all talk to one another. So what somebody in Oklahoma City mandates, somebody in Atlanta does not understand that, so they come up with a different set of rules. And then somebody in New York City and Washington creates some, so there's a lot of conflict, not conflict, but issues that need to continually be resolved. So you need to work with all of the agencies within the agency. The Virginia Department of Aviation, Federal Highway Administration, Virginia Department of Transportation, Virginia Tech. Montgomery County with some zoning issues that we've dealt with in the past, specifically when we're dealing with high knob and development up there, as well as cell towers. Town of Blacksburg, the MPO, and numerous others. And frequently I sit in a meeting, and there's probably 40 or 50 people in there, and everybody is representing someone unique. And so to move forward over where we have in the last 13 years has been a challenge. But it's fun and it's interesting and it's dynamic. Agency rules. Yes, there's a dance between federal, state, local agencies, including the Department of Environmental Quality. I don't know if any of you remember the old Hokie hangar. That's Department of Historical Resources, and DEQ new mandates with stormwater issues and things like that, and fueling. We have to work within all of these specifications. So I have to balance all of the agency demands, all the legal requirements, and while maintaining a self-sustaining rate structure, we are trying to run a business, a government entity, to become revenue neutral while putting enough funds away to support our infrastructure, but it takes a lot of coordination. A lot of people think that when I speak of grants, that the money is coming from the general fund of the United States Treasury. It's not. Airport improvement funds comes from a dedicated transportation trust fund. And it is in fact funded by those bullet points that you see up here. It used to be 1 or 2 bullets, but now they're taxing pretty much everything. So when you get on the plane, half the stuff that you're paying for is being taxed. And soon you'll have a tax on your baggage to be another tax. But the primary one is actually the fuel taxes. Jet fuel alone is something like 26 cents per gallon. And we're dealing with millions and millions and millions of gallons a year. Into the federal budget, it goes approximately, the AIP funds per year is about $3.2 billion. A flight segment tax, so if you get in a plane in Roanoke, it'll cost you $2 in taxes to get off in Charlotte. And then whatever other destination, so that's just $2 a piece. Now I want to go over some of the past products we have encountered over the last 13 years. Those who've been here for a while and just remember the runway protection zone along South Main Street, where the airport authority was very popular back in 2003 and 2005, where we had to purchase a number of buildings. That was a challenging time because the airport authority was actually was recognized by the Federal Aviation Administration, and 3 months later we were mandated for safety reasons to purchase $6.2 million worth of property. We've gone through our apron rehabilitation project to build our infrastructure. We've created an apron expansion for some more infrastructure. We did a runway rehabilitation project 2 years ago, which was $5.7 million. Of that, 90% of it was AIP funds. We've completed our master plan update and environmental assessment. I want to highlight the bureaucracy of an environmental assessment. An environmental assessment usually lasts about 18 months. It took us 6 years. When we were halfway through, we sent it up to the area district office of the FAA, and the person, the environmentalist, died. Not because of our EA, but just died.
It was tough.
When we got it back down, a year later, we moved it up to the Washington district, and that person left, so we had no one to review our environmental assessment for a year. It sat in limbo. So whatever could go wrong, the perfect storm was our EA. But in fact, it's actually been a good thing because we have relocated a road. That was probably the best, in the best interest of everybody in the community. We didn't want to run a road through a forest with white oak trees. So we had missed that issue. Airport layout plan update, miscellaneous improvements. In 13 years of the airport authority, the airport has brought in $17.2 million of Federal Aviation Administration money. That's 90% of the projects. Current projects underway: planning, engineering, and design of the runway extension. That's complete. Land acquisition. We purchased 40 acres of land from Virginia Tech. 25 in fee and 15 in easement, so we can extend the runway. Working with all the agencies, the FAA would not allow us to extend the runway until we owned the property, and through coordination with Virginia Tech, they have given us the property on an IOU with a future payout in 2024, so we now own the property. So 10 years from now, Virginia Tech will be reimbursed for that land. Phase 1 runway extension is underway tomorrow. We open the bids for that project. That is $8.1 million, and that's working with the VDOT project. And Research Center Drive road relocation. So this is an additional $15.7 million that has been brought into the community. Future projects of the runway phase 2, and I'll go over the phasing here in a moment, and then the phase 3, and that's another $10 million of airport improvement money. The Department of Aviation, which has its own unique trust fund, is $1.5 million over the last 13 years, and in the future another $3.2 to develop hangar infrastructure so we can bring corporations in. We have leveraged for every dollar that has been invested by the community. There's been a return of $18.50, which is a huge amount of money invested in this airport over the last 13 years by both the FAA and the Department of Aviation. Everybody in this state sees this as a jewel in Southwest Virginia. And we anticipate that in the next couple of years, they'll be looking at this airport and speaking of this airport in the same breath as Manassas, which is the major, actually Manassas, though a general aviation airport, I believe is either the 3rd or 4th largest in aircraft movements in the state. It has more aircraft movements than Richmond, and it's a GA, they have 500 based aircraft. Why do we have this? Why do we invest all this money? Currently, the economic impact, which is a document created by the Virginia Department of Aviation a couple of years ago, actually 4 years ago, determined that the economic impact, secondary and the induced economic, is over $5 million just coming into this airport. With a longer runway, our master plan determined that we will get a 40% increase in corporate traffic. So the calculations and the calculus is there to determine that. Frankly, we leak a lot of our corporate traffic to Roanoke for the simple reason that many of the insurance companies will not provide insurance on an aircraft landing on a runway less than 5,000 feet. So that is one of the reasons why we're going to 5,000 feet. So we can capture that lost market. Then we will have sufficient infrastructure. How do we support ourselves? Well, frankly, the communities, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Montgomery County, and Virginia Tech provide funds to us every year, which offset some of the deficits. There are 59 general aviation airports in the Commonwealth. Only one generates sufficient income to offset all its expenses, and that is Manassas. The rest of them rely on some subsidies from most airports. Fortunately, this airport, unlike most other general aviation airports, is not operating in a 60% deficit. We're much better than that. So we generate most of our money from fuel sales, land leases. Although the university still owns the property, I charge them fair market value for some of the property that they continue to lease. Because the Federal Aviation Administration is very clear and very precise in their law stating that an airport shall be financially self-sufficient as possible, making sure that the economies are even across the board. There's no discrimination. And the same thing with the town of Blacksburg. They have their fire station. They pay fair market value for that property that they lease from the airport authority. The National Weather Service is now paying fair market value for the 8 acres of property that they have. Their lease expired back in September. They were paying $1 a year for 25 to 20 years, and they're now paying $35,000 a year. So we've renegotiated. We're generating as much revenue as we can, looking for all of the viable alternatives that we can look at. Hangar leases, of course, service agreements, car rentals, and advertising on the wall, and my favorite one, which is football parking. There were 7 football games last year. The airport generated $84,000, which goes directly into the community. That keeps me from coming back to the communities and asking for more money to subsidize this airport. Over the 13 years, this airport has asked for the same amount of money every year except for 1 year. And it was only a $5,000 increase. So I've kept my request flat and looked for, again, those alternate opportunities. And frankly, our football parking is one of our greatest generators. When you look at the amount of money just from football parking, that's an economic indicator right there. We've probably generated about $250,000 in the last 7 years just for parking cars. It's a cottage industry, and it's a good one. My last couple of slides here is, if you'll see the yellow where it begins on the runway, that will be the extension. The line that runs diagonally through that, and I know this can't be seen on television, but this here is the current Research Center Drive. And here's the existing runway from this point here to this point here. What we're doing is we are extending the runway 1,800 feet to the west, and we're displacing 1,000 feet to the east. What this is going to give us is a 5,500 foot usable runway with a balanced runway safety area of 1,000 feet on either end. As you can see, there's a lot of interchange and construction going on down here with VDOT Federal Highway. VDOT is responsible for this section through here. And then the airport, working with the Federal Aviation Administration, is moving FAA money through the airport to VDOT so they can build this road. Now, one of the reasons it took 6 years to do the EA is that the road was originally going to go through here, but there was a wetlands, and the FAA definitely frowns upon impacting wetlands. Although they don't care about trees, they're more interested about wetlands. And so, after 5 years, VDOT came in and determined that this was the better relocation. So the interchange here is going to be, this area up here will be improved. This down here by the National Weather Service will be improved. Here's the airport terminal right here. This is the new hangar for Virginia Tech, and we're in discussion, very good discussion at this time, with a developer to build a 25,000 or 30,000 square foot hangar with first right of refusal for another 15,000 square foot. The site infrastructure will be reimbursed, and we will get fair market value on the land lease. This is the land that we just purchased over here in the runway protection zone. So there's a lot of synergies going on between VDOT, the Corporate Research Center in Phase 2, the university coming down through their master plan, and the airport extending to the west. Actually, it's a lot of fun. It's interesting, but it's a lot of fun. Now, this is the Hokey Bird, and this is a Cessna Citation 2, and it carries 8 passengers, and actually it'll go from Blacksburg to Richmond in 29 minutes versus 4 hours, or a 3-hour drive. And it purchases approximately about 600 gallons when empty. The aircraft to the right of that is a Gulfstream 350. That aircraft lands and accommodates on a 5,500 foot runway. It purchases 1,800 gallons of jet fuel with a net profit of about $2 per gallon. So this is, the people on the right usually are in the Fortune 200 and beneath. These are the people that are coming into the community that are going to be building businesses that will be hiring 200 and 300 people. And the airport authority is very cautious as that we're not going to be building a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield, thinking that if we build it, they will come. There's a methodical way that we're going about this. And so infrastructure is being developed at this particular time, so when this individual, or 3 or 4 of the individuals to the left come in, we will have satisfactory land for them to build their hangars. And so that pretty much finishes my conclusion, and here's my favorite. This is Corning Glass, the one with the blue stripes on it. And there's the Hokey Bird to the left of it right there. That's just one of my favorite pictures. Any questions?
Questions, board members, comments? Well, Michael, I can see that. Go ahead.
Having been and worked with Mike and been with the airport since it first started,
13 years yesterday.
And so I want to say we are so fortunate to have Michael St. Jean
Thank you.
as our director, because he understands what goes on with General Aviation Airport, and so he's been really quite a leader for us, as well as the whole board has. So I think one of the most difficult things we ran into was the environmental assessment, because that put us behind some. And of course, when we had to write the runway, do the runway protection zone over there on Main Street, South Main Street. But anyway, thank you, Michael. And
Thank you very much.
it was an excellent presentation, and I think you can see how much there is that goes on, and all of the things that you have to coordinate in order to make it work. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Well, we can see that you've got a whole lot going on, especially with the new interchange going in and extending the runway and moving at a dairy farm and all of that. Thank you for coming and
Thank you very
bringing us up to date.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah. You might get big enough for Air Force One to land there one day. Next order of business is to go into work session. Be it resolved, the Board of Supervisors hereby enters into work session for the purpose of discussing the following. That is the animal shelter facility update and finance plan and illicit discharge ordinance under tab A. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to go into work session. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed? Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
We're in work session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 2 items for work session this evening. The first one is an update on our facility planning and a proposed financing plan for the animal shelter. We've talked about this project for quite a while, and so we're moving forward with some thoughts on that and would like to brief you on that. And then once we're done with the animal shelter, Doug Burton's here this evening, our stormwater engineer, to talk to us a little bit about an illicit discharge ordinance. It's not quite as sexy as it sounds, but Doug will go over that with us. So, Carol, I'm going to recognize you for the animal shelter.
Okay. We have a number of people that are presenting here tonight, and we thought one of the first things we would do is start out with a short video of the facility. I know a number of you have been there, some of you many, many times, and it doesn't look a lot better than it did probably when you were there. But there are people who may be watching at home who may not have seen what it looks like there. So the perspective from this video is more one of what does it look like to citizens who are going there to adopt a pet, and what might it look like to someone who's taken their family and they just want to see the animals. This weekend, our volunteers in our Parks and Rec department had a Fur Fest event at the Frog Pond parking lot, and there were a number of people walking from over where the animal shelter is over to and from the Frog Pond. What does it look like to people who may have had their family out for a picnic at the shelter and are at the picnic shelter and are walking over to see the animals? So this is a little different perspective, but keep in mind it's from what it might look like to people who are coming there as an event. It's a couple of minutes, and following that we have a number of our volunteers over here to my right with Jason Shelton, who has been here many, many times to address you, and Jason's going to come up and talk some about the invaluable work that our volunteers are doing and what it's like for them being in this facility. Following that, we're going to hear from Thompson Litton. There are architects on the project, and they're going to give you an update and the status of where the project is now, and we're sort of going to finish it up with the financing plan of how we can move forward to pay for it. So With that said, I'm going to start our video here. Hopefully, yep, there's Josh who's got the lights. And with that, I'm going to ask Jason to come up and address the board again. What all of our volunteers do.
So, my name is Jason Shelton, President of Friends of Animal Care and Control. Here again, talk a little bit about, I want to really brag on our volunteers, and it's going to be a little different this time. You kind of know what we do. We've talked a lot about, you know, our mission and all those things, and but we've had an influx of some new blood. That always helps kind of reinvigorate the group, and so Fur Fest was created and the Pet Jam was created, and we have these great events now that really, it's not board members coordinating this. These are volunteers that are coming in and say, I want to do this because I play in a band and it would be really good to be able to give back, or I want to do something to help bring the community together in the spot where the animal shelter is going to be. So I want to kind of go through those and discuss that piece. You know, for FACC's mission, I think some of the biggest pieces are the collaborations with rescues and the transfers that we're doing, the spay-neuter success rate that we have as far as the follow-up that goes on, and that's directly because of Shannon and Marilyn just working their tails off, and at the part-time level. You know, this is not even full-time jobs. They're doing this as part-time, and we're just so thankful to have them there to really help pull this everything that needs to come together for the paperwork to get done, for the animals to get adopted, for the shelter to be open longer. All those pieces are just huge. So the Pet Jam was an event that we had on 4/25. It raised about $2,500, and it was Robin Tooney. Yes, Tooney. She's with Awesome Sauce, and she has had connections with the Awesome Sauce and the Acoustic Kind, and so she brought them together, and she went out and she solicited donations, and she pulled together this great event that sold tickets for, and people showed up, and we had silent auctions and raffles and door prizes, and it was just a great time with, you know, families and music and getting the community together just to kind of celebrate the animal shelter. So we really thank Robin for her efforts, and definitely the Awesome Sauce and the Acoustic Comment for donating their time to, and then all the businesses. The Holiday Inn in Christiansburg donated their room for us to have the event in, and there's people out there that are bringing the community together and pulling more awareness about us, and really getting these businesses involved, which is critical to what we need to do. Fur Fest. This was our poster for Fur Fest for last week, for Saturday. And so we had not only a number of animal rescues from the area that came up, and they brought dogs and cats, and we had our own dogs out, and we had things like agility, and we had the photo booth where people were taking pictures. This young man here, Luke, he built a dog house that we had a silent auction for, and so it was this great, he did it as a school project.
Harding Avenue.
Yeah, there you go. We had the Margaret Beeks they had a class do a bunch of student art, and they had that on display out there. And, that is unfortunately me in the dog costume. I was the only one that would put it on, so bear the heat. And
it was a nice, cool day to wear that too.
Yeah, it was a little warm. But here's just some more pictures. We had the K9 unit out there. They did a demo. We had the urban mushing team for the Siberian Husky Rescue, and they were out there. Those dogs are great. The photo booth where you can dress up and do your little, tiaras and get the dog in a little thing. And these are the Adopt Me vests that we purchased for our dogs. So we had some shelter dogs that we paraded through, and were able to show off to the community. And it just really was I think the thing that was most amazing to me was that you really saw this as potentially an area where you could have a dog park, and you could have the interaction with the Parks and Rec department. Mitchell was so excited; he's ready to do this in the fall, and I need probably a year. I don't know if we can go right back to this in the fall. We probably need to wait till next spring. But the fact that his enthusiasm is there for it is just huge, and that just helps us have that partnership that we need to be able to pull off things like this. So this was from one presentation that we did a while ago. I think this was the first time that we had the initial feasibility study done back in 2009, and I like the slide because it really does reiterate that piece that there's no one solution that solves this. It really is that combination of solutions that get you where you need to go as a community. And the fact that we have citizens that are taking ownership in their animal shelter just really, I have so much gratitude for that. It's been a long time coming. We have, my wife and I have been taking pictures there. We started in 2001. I've been coming to present to you guys for 9 years on this. So, this has just been a long time coming, and it really feels like it's growing, and that the intense volunteer support and the community education programs, those are things that are just going to boom even more with the new facility. And so just to go back, I know you saw the video, but there were a few things that weren't in the video that I just wanted to highlight again. The fact that when it rains, and it doesn't have to rain much, the office floods. So all the paperwork that's kept in there, all the, you have flooding offices, you have flooding kennels where the dogs can't escape from the water, concrete walls that are falling down, roofs that are collapsing, dogs that can get out and climb on top of runs and get their head stuck. So it's just, it's just time. And this other quote was another one that I really like from the Humane Society of the United States, where it is so easy just to state what the solution is, but it takes so much more to really pull it together. And I believe with all my heart that we have a solid foundation in the volunteer and community area, and we just need the facility to go forward. So that's all that I have. I was going to be short and sweet. Any questions for me?
How many folks do you think attended the event on Saturday?
The one thing we didn't do was have counters. But I feel like there was a lot. I mean, it went from 11 to 3, and I would say from like 11 to probably 2, there was a solid stream of cars and people, and there were people parking over at the landfill. They were parking on the other side where the county garage is, and it was a solid stream. So I can't give you a number, but
it was a lot.
We feel really good about the turnout that happened, especially being the first year event. We were really excited. And the rescues were excited. We have rescues, North Mountain Small Dog Rescue, that is in Giles, and they have other up in West Virginia, but they had applications on dogs. Because they pull dogs from us all the time. They saved us probably a week and a half ago, where they pulled 7 dogs from us when we were going to have to euthanize. And it's that kind of collaboration and just, unending. I mean, these ladies are awesome. It's just, they're incredible. So.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Chair, the next presentation is from Jack Murphy with Thompson and Litton, and Chris Phillips is with him. Jack and Chris have been working on the design of the animal shelter. You may recall the last picture that Jason had in his presentation was the scheme that we had several years ago. But Jack and Chris have been working with Shelter Planners of America and with county staff and with Jason and his folks to come up with a facility that will serve our needs for the future, but also is very practical and pragmatic, and something that I think will be something we'd be very proud of. So, Jack?
Thank you. It's great to see everybody again. It's been a while since I've been in the boardroom, but I did get to present to most of you in January during your retreat there. And a lot of what we have tonight is very similar to what I presented then, but our energies have really been focused on refining the design and really consciously looking at every bit and piece as far as costs go, and that the impact for the long-term viability of the shelter as a whole. I will add that, as Mr. Meadows pointed out, our work with Shelter Planners has been obviously the basis of our design work from their study that they did, but working with the rest of the county, and particularly Jason and the Friends of Animal Control, is just amazing to me. I met Jason and his wife 15 years ago, I think, through a humane society, and their level of energy and commitment to this has just been unyielding. And just hear him speaking here today is just amazing how much they do, as we've seen how little they actually have there, and how they're really the core and the success for what you do have right now. So Chris Phillips is a project manager and an architect with Thompson Litton. He's been instrumental working with this group. I've been kind of arm's length through this project. Chris has been, all over this project inside out, and he's known for his attention to detail, particularly with costs and controlling costs as a whole, working with the team. And I'm going to ask Chris to present to you tonight where the design is right now and what we've been doing, again, just to keep our arms around the cost, not let things get out of control. We know that it's a very sensitive item. We know it's an important item for the county, and we want it to be something that can stand alone and be sustainable. So, Chris?
Thanks, Jack. Good evening. As Jack had mentioned, I believe he presented in January, and I think we'll just take a few moments to kind of refresh where we were then and bring everybody up to speed then following that. Most all of you have been through some sort of major building project, so there's 3 phases to design. There's schematic design, design development, and then construction documents. And to give you a picture where we are, we're 2/3 of the way through. We just finished the design development phase, and so that's what we'll talk through tonight. So just a quick overview. Shelter Planners of America had worked with the county to identify a program early on through their report and study process. And in that report, we have several main components here. The main administrative area being offices and animal control, clinical, and a public meeting room, which we find to be a very essential part of this facility and facilities like this across the nation. We have a stray wing and an adoption wing for dogs. And in the study, our capacities were 72 dogs and 64 cats. And in consideration for future growth, possibly a future clinic and additions to the stray wing to make that larger as well. So that was the identified program early on. To bring you up to speed on our schedule, as I said before, we have 3 major design phases. We've recently completed the design development phase. Schematic design was completed in November, late November. We have completed design development in the mid-February, and then we went into a value engineering exercise to help control and manage your budget. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then our next phase that we're waiting to move into now is construction documents phase, and that'll be bringing all the final details to the drawings and specifications and getting those ready for the bidding process. So we'll flush out all those details in that phase. Then we'll bid and award the project, and right now, as the schedule is looking, we'll be ready to start construction phase about October 1st. And right now we're projecting about a year construction period, which we feel is probably generous for the project type. So early on, we identified the purpose of our project here, and we wanted to make sure that we stay true to this vision throughout the construction process. And ultimately, we're wanting to increase adoptions, and we do that through increased visitation, and that is bolstered by the visibility. Now, these 3 main points are all intertwined, so they can't exist without the other, and they're all dependent on one another in order to make a successful shelter. So we're going to increase adoption, increase the visitation, and increase visibility. And we hope to use the architecture to encourage that process. This is your existing site plan, just to get everybody oriented. This is your existing garage facility here, your existing shelter here. Cinnabar Road is running along this part of the drawing here, and 460 is out beyond. The property that we're looking at is roughly in this area right here. This is showing the development of that property with your new shelter and footprint. So we'll have an entrance off of the existing entrance into the garage and shelter area, new parking, and then we'll connect to Cinnabar as well and provide a separate entrance for the animal control as well as staff. So that's a secure entrance behind a secure site gate. This will be the footprint. We'll look at the plan here shortly. We've identified in the plan a possibility for a future clinic. That's not to be designed now, that's a future, but we're going to make provisions for that in our site development. So we'll take advantage of our time we have now to make sure the infrastructure is in place and the pad is ready and so forth. And then the stray wing here, we've also identified a possibility for future addition to expand that as well. So that's just a really quick overview of the site, right off of Cinnabar there, just in front of your existing shelter. This is the current plan. It has not changed dramatically since schematic design when you saw it last. But just to give you a quick overview, this is the plan has flipped from where we were on the site plan. So now 460 is out here, and Cinnabar is out here with a main public entrance, a public meeting space here, which we know to be essential to the success of these facilities. Animal control is on this side of the building. They're almost a standalone operation, so we give them their own entrance, sort of a truck sally port there for the secure transport of animals. These are the cat rooms and the dog puppy rooms, small breed here, opening onto the courtyard in the back. This would be the stray wing, significantly smaller than the adoption wing. So we have stray and isolation and quarantine there for the proper care of those animals. And then this is the adoption wing here, kennels, with a courtyard in the middle that would encourage the public to visit and adopt an animal there and be able to interact with those animals on a one-to-one basis. There's also rooms within the shelter where the public or potential adopters could bring the animals and have one-on-one time with them inside the facility as well. So just a quick overview of what we project the building to look like. This is a really rough 3D rendering of where we are through design development. So again, this is the view you will see from 460 and Cinnabar. This is the adoption wing here, the stray wing here, and then animal control will be on this end of the building with that courtyard there. And just rotating around the space here a little bit. The adoption and stray wings both will have internal and external kennel areas, so the dogs can take advantage of being outside. We know the health benefits of that, as well as making happier dogs and more adoptable dogs. So that's the reasoning behind some of this. This is a secondary entrance here for volunteer staff, as well as the ability to use the public meeting room in off hours, so that the whole building does not have to be operational should the public meeting room space be needed. Looking at the view from the back in the courtyard area here, again, some exterior kennel areas so the dogs can be viewed from the outside on both the adoption and the stray wing, as well as the cat room here, and then the puppy rooms here also having availability to the exterior. This was the rendering that we produced at the conclusion of design development, showing the architecture, the aesthetic appeal of the building. We're thinking stone and potentially some cement siding, things that are durable and maintenance free, and have an aesthetic value that gives the building an iconic character, something that's identifiable from 460, so that it can be viewed from the road and everyone can identify that that's the Montgomery County Animal Shelter. Now to talk about your budget. As your project manager, I'm responsible for general oversight of the project, and to be your consistent face throughout the project. But my primary goals are to help maintain your budget and help maintain your schedule. So we're going to talk briefly about your schedule here this afternoon, this evening. Early on, with that, before even beginning design, we had spent a little time with shelter planners and identified a project probable cost. In other words, this is helping you establish what we think the project might cost from an AE perspective, and through that process, we identified about a $4.1 to $4.2 million project. At every milestone throughout the design phases, we will have our independent cost estimator review our drawings and provide a cost estimate back to us that is from an independent cost estimator, such that they have a better understanding of what the current bid market is like, what the current labor market's like. So at schematic design, we went through that process. We take that back to our office, we review it carefully and vet that estimate, and then we send back our comments. So it's a back and forth for several weeks, and throughout that process, our independent cost estimator at schematic design identified the project at 4.3. So we felt very good about the project at that point. We felt like we were very close to where we needed to be. So we finished design development, and as we go through design development, we tend to bring more details to the project, and that helps the cost estimator identify costs a little more accurately. So throughout the process of design development of the cost estimate at that point, we had brought the construction estimated cost up to 4.8. So that's a difference of about $5 million between schematic design and design development. Now, when we see this, we take a step back and say, okay, I believe it's time to enter into a value engineering exercise, which we did, and that's to help bring your project back within what we have identified as your, early on as your budget. So right now, at this point, at the conclusion of design development, we were at 4.8. So we enter into a value engineering exercise, and I will stress that the folks on the design committee, as well as your as T&L, we don't want to sacrifice or compromise quality. We see the results of what we're dealing with now, with the block deteriorating, the concrete deteriorating, holding the diseases in the materials, in the built materials that are making the animals sick. We also understand the importance of the initial investment in making that dollar go as far as we can for as long as we can. So what's the life cycle costs and things of that nature. So going into value engineering, the number one rule, we said, okay, we're not going to sacrifice quality. So that might mean that we need to sacrifice quantity, which we'll look at in just a minute. Number two, we don't want to negatively impact the facility operations. So we don't want to make the operation of the facility any more difficult for Jason's crew than it needs to be. We're going to identify some additive bid items. On bid day, it's very difficult, even though we try to be in touch with the construction market. On bid day, you just don't know where that number's going to fall. So we want to identify some bid items as some safeguards that can be added to the project if it comes within budget or under budget and the project would allow. So we have a few of those to talk about. And then we want to stay true to those project goals, increase visibility, visitation, and adoption. So our VE goal was to reduce the project by about $500,000 to get it back closer to the 4.2 mark. So we had went through a value engineering exercise in which we produced this matrix. Here we put our estimate on it, on what each of these items might, what you might realize as savings by taking these on. Value engineering doesn't always mean that you're saving, you're deducting money. Sometimes it makes more sense to put more money in other places. So we also evaluate things like materials and our specifications to better the project either by deduct or additive. So we went through this process. This is a vetted list. There were quite a bit more here. We went through and eliminated some of those, but this is a vetted list that we think are the best potential cost savings options. And throughout the process here, we've identified almost $412,000. So we got really close to that $500,000 mark. One of those, just to talk briefly about, remember I talked about we don't want to decrease quality. We would look at decreasing quantity. So one option may be to decrease the adoption kennel wing by 10 kennels, and that's a savings of $192,000. So we're looking at saving some money there, but that would be designed anyway as an additive bid item, such that if it's a good bid market on bid day, that could be built if the budget would allow. So identified $412,000 roughly in VE savings. Another one of those items that we evaluated was removing of the large cupola from the roof. This is pre-value engineering, so this is what you saw at the conclusion of design development. And then this is without post-VE to try to get some savings there. Architecturally, it's wonderful. The architect didn't screams that it needs to be there, but operationally, it doesn't provide anything other than maybe some daylight to the public space. So, you know, it's one of those things that where we wanted to evaluate what that looks like before moving forward. So after all that said, and to wrap up here, through our VE session at the conclusion of design development, we've identified almost $412,000 in savings, and our total bottom line here is we're back to $4.2 million, $4.3 million, which is where we need to be as a project cost. So, thank you very much.
Just add one thing to those cost estimates too, that you notice with each phase the design becomes more refined. Well, there's construction contingencies, design contingencies within those estimates. There's a difference from the schematic to the design development that as more of the project is known, the contingency got a little bit smaller. But that figure, that 4.2, still has an 8% contingency in it. Now, as we move to the next phase of design, that internal contingency for the design will be gone. So we'll know all the parts at that point with the next price, the next project. So it's part of the refining process as we work our way through. So we're standing out, boys, ready to go into that final design phase right now, construction documents. Carol, talk some more about the cost as a whole, or just any of your questions you might ask.
Yeah, before we get to Carol's got some information on excuse me, potential funding, but while you've got Chris and Jack here, we wanted to let you guys, if there's any questions regarding what's been proposed, any questions about the numbers to date, they're the folks that can answer. Question, Gary?
I just had a question about the design. Will the removal of the cupola impact visibility from the road at all?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It does. You know, with the cupola there, you've got an icon from 460, so it adds that value. It still is going to be plenty visible from 460, but it does impact it.
That was a $12,000. I think I've about got all the numbers memorized. We've been through it so many times.
Yeah, it's about a $12,000 savings to trim it.
For the picture, you can't really tell just how big that is. Yes.
The square foot?
Yeah, it's about 24 by 24 feet.
Windows all the way around it or just on one side?
All the way up 4 sides.
Yeah, the way it was designed with windows all the way around, and then it opened up into the lobby, so it provided light into the lobby too, but
We can probably back up and look at the plan and make it a little more clear.
I like it.
well, we all liked
There
it.
we go. Yeah.
We all liked it, but we
Don't we
beat it.
have anybody we can get
So
money
that,
from?
that cupola sets roughly right over top of this area right here. So that's your main entrance here. That's where you're greeted. The public is greeted immediately when they come in. So it straddles this reception desk right there.
I will say the design team, and Jason was on that team along with me and Carol and Steve Phillips, and I mean, we beat the daylights out of this plan trying to find every dime we could and still keep the quality and still keep the capacity. Now, we did talk about reducing 10 of the runs, which helped reduce some of the cost. And the other big thing that we talked about doing was going with a architectural shingle roof as opposed to a standing seam metal roof. A standing seam metal roof, as the old saying goes, would really pop and look good and last a long time, but it's expensive. And a 25.
Well, there's about $100,000 difference between the standing seam metal and the architectural shingle.
Yeah, we priced both.
That in a house and that in commercial.
It's a lot of
I mean,
lot of
it'd have
roof.
to be more than 10 times as much.
Yeah, it's a lot of roof.
It's the complexity of the roof and multiple changes in angles.
Yeah, go back to one of your 3Ds and you can really see how much roof.
It should be.
Yeah, there's a lot of roof on that structure. But again, what we had talked about on the roof is there's a couple of things we can put in as alternates on bid day, because the estimate may be 4.2, 4.3, but if we get a bid of 3.5, then we may be able to put in a metal roof as an option and be able to take it and still be under our budget. So that was
The design on this cost how much?
Our fees? Show those to you.
I guess that's the design in it.
yeah,
Thought I heard it there a while ago, but
So if you look at the heading under soft costs, we have 3 categories there. Basic services, additional services, and expenses. That gives you some total of the AE fees.
it's about $390,000, and that includes the monies that have been paid to shelter planners as
That's
well,
right.
doesn't
That
it?
includes your consultants.
Yeah, we subcontracted, or Thompson and Litton subcontracted with shelter planners because we wanted to, I mean, these guys have had a lot of experience. We wanted somebody else that does nothing but animal shelters looking at it too, to see what their thoughts were. So that plan's been vetted out pretty strong.
So this price includes the other two? Okay.
Now you said that whoever was on this planning for this shelter, I know the volunteers was, and Greg was Ray or any of the animal control officers involved?
Steve Phillips was involved from General Services, and Steve got input from those guys as well.
I think we should have had one of them on the, because, I mean, with all due respect, volunteer, I mean, appreciate what they do, because I volunteer too, but these 3 people's over every day. I think they should have had a little bit of input on it.
We did have their input. It was just coming through Steve. He was reviewing the plans with them for their specific area for the animal control. I don't think Jason's group was trying, they weren't giving us design advice on the animal control area. It's kind of, as Chris pointed out, an independent area within the whole. So we have received quite a bit of input from those folks. It just came through Steve Phillips.
Now you said the next phase of this, so this cost may go up?
No, that's the current estimate. Go back to that slide if you will,
Sure.
Chris. I think it's... Yeah, the current estimate, based on all the value engineering, based on the best design so far, and as Jack said, is if it moves into, if the board is ready to move forward and we authorize Thompson and Litton to go to final design, those the contingency number, that design contingency is kind of in the middle of $259,081. That number should continue to shrink because we'll be fine-tuning, and so the best estimate right now based on design is about $4,278,049. That's the estimate right now. But if we can get if we can get this thing done and get a favorable bid environment, we can do much better than that.
Yes.
Yes.
Considering all the trouble we've had with roofs on various buildings we have, is it really worth the cost to not put the metal roof on?
Well, most of our challenges with roofs and
Are flat.
Yeah.
But still, how far down the line will we go, or how many years for the architectural roof versus a metal roof?
An architectural shingle roof is typically warranted for 25 years. And most of the time you'll get 25 years or even more out of them. The metal roofs, I can't say that they're a lifetime warranty because that really isn't the case, but most have a collar fastness of 50 years and will may be maintained. They will be in good shape for that long at least.
Well, and that's why we definitely thought that one should be a bid alternate, as one that we get a price on as well, because if we can afford a metal roof, we certainly ought to try to go that route.
Yeah, I really do think that, I don't know, I appreciate all you've done, and I know how hard it is to determine what the cost of a building will be when it's all said and done. And you don't know until you get the bids in anyway, just where you're going. But I really have a feeling that for a building that's an animal shelter and that we want to be around, and I know in the beginning you said we don't want to sacrifice quality, but I think if there's any way that you could put the metal roof on there, it would certainly be worthwhile for us to do it. I hate to think that in a few years, you don't know, an architectural roof shingle roof may last a good while, but again, it may not, depending on how the structure goes. So it seems like to me that, we do everything we could to try to get a roof that's going to last forever. We expect the building to last forever and can be updated just as any other building would be, but I really would prefer to have that metal roof, if at all possible.
As Mr. Meadows said, our plan is to get a price for it in addition to the other, and come bid day, we receive the bids and it will be identified and come back to the board and let you see and you weigh.
Yeah, well, we know it'll be more expensive, obviously. You say $100,000, but I don't know. Sometimes I notice around town in Blacksburg, the roofs that are still standing, and I know from my husband's parents how the slate roofs that are there, they're still there.
Absolutely.
And they've never ever had to replace a roof, whereas I've had various and sundry shingles, and I frankly need to replace. And I think the last time we went with architectural as much as we could, and they're still there. So there we go.
Yeah, just to come back to the cupola for a minute. I'd like to, is that a potential add-on for the bid, or would that require it to be within the construction documents? Because my concern is simply is that for $12,000, if that's really the only cost that we're talking about in that, what you lose in the light and the openness of that entryway in which you want to invite people in addition to the elevation that's lost and the visibility that you lose because of that, I don't think that's necessarily a corner that needs to be cut for that small amount of money. If we're talking $50,000, $100,000, then maybe. But for $12,000, I think the benefits, the welcoming atmosphere that would create within the building, and then again the visibility that you would gain from elsewhere, not just on 460, but anywhere around there. I think you're losing a lot more than just the $12,000.
Sure.
Especially if it is, as it looks like it's ringed with windows, you're going to get a lot more sunlight. You're going to get the space of elevation of the ceiling, as you come in there. The last thing we want to do is recreate kind of the dank, dour closedness of the old animal shelter. Not that this is doing that, but anything that we can do.
You'd like to be as far removed from that as you
exactly.
can.
Exactly. So I would ask my colleagues here to consider at least putting that back in for such a small amount of money.
I don't see why we can't just, I like the idea of it being in there, but let's get the bid on it.
Yeah.
And
go for it.
There's a couple things there that I like. But if we can get
that was probably the one we had the most discussion about before we finally said, because we were trying so hard to get it as low as we could, but I agree. I think that it provides an architectural draw to it, and in the evenings when the lights are on, people will notice it.
And please understand that the purpose of our exercise was to provide options, not necessarily
it was we had to get pretty cold and unemotional with a few things.
That's right. You saw that list, with the exception of reducing the number of kennels in the metal roof. Most of them were, $5,000 items. It was really difficult to put them out there and prioritize those two. As Chris pointed out, it doesn't, it's a quality of the space issue, but it's not necessarily impacting the operation.
Well, in that section there, how tall is that ceiling part?
To give you an idea of scale, there we go. The bearing height for the stud wall at the perimeter is a 12-foot stud wall. We have to have a substantial amount of space to run our ductwork. So if that's 12 feet, then that's probably another additional 10 feet there to the bearing point of the roof.
And you said, what was the?
About 24. Again, without scale here, I'm talking round numbers, but I'd say it's about 24 by 24.
Yeah.
What do you think, heating and air, how much are we going to lose with that up there?
It is substantially more amount of volume to heat and cool. It sure is. What that is, I don't know if they're running the calculations, but it is more space to heat and cool.
It's okay. We got 24,000, 250,000 or something.
On the counter of that, you'd be bringing in more natural light into the space,
that's right.
So perhaps less lighting. I don't think they'd be.
unless you engineered something to where you could close it up when it gets up to 12 foot. It could be done. It's not likely, but it could be done.
Mr. Tuck, you good?
Just in discussions, and for me, the price tag is too much. I know I'm in the minority. I believe the last vote was 5-2. I know how to count to 4, and last time 5 was more. But in looking at the price tag and in considering the purchase of the real estate, I recognize that we have got to have a new animal shelter. I'm someone who's adopted a pet from our current animal shelter, my last dog. My cat is a rescue cat, which acts like a dog. But at the same time, I think that we've got to look at means of doing it for less. And I appreciate the architectural features. I understand why you might want them. But in my mind, this is excessive. and I just can't agree with it. I understand that where the majority is at, but I'm just not with you.
Mr. Chair, I might suggest, it might be a good segue. Carol has a couple of slides as far as putting the numbers together so you can see how the numbers work. That may generate a little more discussion, and Jack and Chris, it may bring you back up to answer a few more questions, but that may be a good segue into looking at the numbers. Okay. So
that's good, yeah.
Well, counting the title slide, it's a couple of slides. Counting the title slide, it's a couple of slides.
Okay, what we have here is, it's sort of like a patchwork quilt, so bear with me as we go to the different pieces and they're sort of stitched together to pay for this. The reason we're looking at this now is to share with you there is a plan for finance of this facility, and second of all, before we can go to bid, we need to have an appropriation out there so they can move ahead with the bid process. The number I'm starting with is the number that Chris and Jack left off with, 4278049. And from that, as you all discussed earlier, the A&E fees are already funded. That came out of the account that was appropriated previously, so I've subtracted that off. There's also some funds that have been appropriated that remain in the account. That's the 238,182. So those monies are already appropriated and available. I've subtracted that. On the slide in talking about the undesignated monies from fiscal year 2014, there were a number of items listed there. One item that I listed was an amount for one-time funds for an animal shelter reserve. If that number were to be used and we subtract that off, that would reduce this amount by $287,333. We also have remaining some 2008 bonds that were initially issued for the courthouse project and the public safety building renovation. We have remaining bond funds. That's in the amount of $3.1 million.
And I'd like to point out on that too, that is the total amount that's remaining. That is bond monies that were borrowed, and we also earned interest on those monies since 2008 as we've slowly spent those down. So the total is about $3.1 million, but the courthouse, of course, is completely paid for and done. We're within 30 to 45 days of wrapping up the public safety building, at least the construction phase of it. And those appear, that's our best estimate right now of the monies that are going to be left in those bond funds.
Right, and I will mention, if anybody's wondering how did you make any interest on bonds, in 2008 we were fortunate, we got a lock-in rate at 3.34%. It was a lock-in for 5 years, and then the market immediately crashed after that. So we were fortunate enough to be able to earn an interest rate that actually did pay some monies toward it. With those numbers subtracted from the total, the balance remaining needed for this project is 246,134. And what we've listed down here are 3 options of where you could take that money from. You can take it from the capital reserve, and that's, you see to the far left-hand side, the balance that would remain. There is still $2 million in your capital fund. If you wanted to take it from that, it'd leave 1.8 in a balance. And there's a facilities reserve with 1.372. If you wanted to take it from that, it'd still leave a balance of 1.1 million. It would be our recommendation to use the capital reserve fund, have all the pieces of this package together, and move forward with the appropriation.
Matt.
A couple of years ago, I believe, we had earmarked $1 million in reserve funds for that. Where's that here?
The $1 million, the A&E, okay, if you start with the $1 million, subtract from that $1 million the amount that we paid for the land, which I don't remember that number off the top of my head.
400.
Subtract the 390,400 from that million, that's where that came from. And then where we have available appropriated funds, that's the remaining balance.
That's the combination.
Yes.
Those three items are the $1 million that we had said.
Yeah, the land, which is not up there, the A&E funds, and the available appropriated funds. Those three pieces are what made up that $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I'm ready to go.
I would just like to say that I think it was a really creative way to put the different funding together. I'm glad Carol and Craig could look at this and find a way to do this. And of course, you all know where you know where I'm coming from. So I want to see this go forward, and I would like to see us go forward with it tonight. But thank you for doing all this work to get it to where it is now.
Thank you.
Well, I will pass out, and this is just, we drew this up as a proposed addendum to the agenda this evening, if the board is prepared to move forward to show how the dollars would be allocated to be able to move this project forward. Do you have a copy of this?
No.
Well, I
believe I know what's on it.
It just basically allocates the remaining amount necessary, which is the 246 and the 238, I think.
It's the one-time funds of the 287,333 and the 246,134.
Thank you.
And then the appropriation of the bond funds to that.
That's right.
The others have been appropriated.
So that's all that's remaining that needs to be appropriated. And if the board, and again, I didn't want to assume, but we always want to be prepared. If the board wanted to move forward with that after we come out of work session, it could be added as an item of business, if that's the desire of the board.
Any other questions?
I think we should move forward with it. I mean, I don't know that it's necessary to delay, but as I said, I think there's some things that we've looked at it that we would like to add to it. So, or I would.
Carol, could you just clarify the capital reserve fund that the staff is recommending we use the money for? What is that traditionally used for?
We keep that held in reserve for different items that may come across that require additional funding for capital. Right now, I can't think of one that we've done recently. It's different from what you normally set the facilities reserve for, which is more maintenance kinds of issues, and this has been set aside before for more capital project issues.
Okay, but this is separate, for example, than the monies we've set aside for school capital.
Yes.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's unrelated to that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of those three lines, the second line, the $2 million in capital, that's really set aside for future facilities for the county, i.e. if we decide on a garage at a later date or other type facility. And then the facilities reserve is mainly big items such as roofs or if, heaven forbid, if an HVAC system were to fail in a building, those several $100,000. So those are sort of our savings accounts for those type items. The reason we haven't used much out of capital reserve is most of the projects we've we've allocated the funding for, and
Well, and we've been finishing up the bond projects.
right.
Okay, do we have, you have a question?
I know we talked about it earlier today. Franklin County is building a new animal shelter for $1.5 million. And they said it's going to double their capacity for animals. Me and Craig talked about it some today. He said you might have a little more information on it.
Not off the top of my head, but I believe I ran the calculation based on the space they used for 1.5 million, and if you had the same level of space with the capacity of animals, the square footage cost was about the same. Is that the one?
That's correct. That's the one that, because that was on the news. Their proposed square footage is much smaller, and if you look at the square footage cost of what they're looking at and what we're looking at, the square footage costs were pretty much comparable. Our facility's a lot bigger.
But part of what I think made that confusing is the smaller cost was not looking at a combined facility with their Humane Society, which made the numbers much more. And so if you look at the cost for the space it was going to take for a facility for their Humane Society and their current facility, the space I think they were looking at was just replacing their existing facility. So when you actually compare apples to apples, it was roughly the same
square footage cost.
We can't vote in closed meeting, but we can obtain consensus on whether to move this thing forward.
Can we just go out of closed meeting? If you have
Yeah, we got another thing. We got to talk about stormwater before we go to closed meeting, but just want to see whether we can get consensus in work session. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we got consensus.
While I'm up here, I'll just pull up Doug's presentation.
This, like I said, this is sexy. Carol, Jack, Chris, everybody, thank you so much for being here on this. As I sent out an email earlier today, we've been talking about this a long time. And Doug, another thing we've been talking about not quite as long is stormwater, and one of the items that we need to address is an illicit discharge detection and elimination ordinance that's part of our MS4 requirement. And Doug Burton's here this evening to briefly run through that with us. So Doug, the floor is yours.
Yes, and it's a big phrase, and it's not as sexy, and there might be some unattractive images, so I'll apologize for that. But down there at the lower right, that's our actual permit that we got from the state. That's our general permit. That's our official license to be an MS4 locality. Okay, and the plan is, as an MS4 locality, that the county will actually start to function to actually detect and eliminate illicit discharges. Now that's in the future. That's not an immediate thing, but we need to start somewhere. And that's just part of the plan. And it is part of the plan if we're going to operate as a municipal separate storm sewer system. I think you guys have seen some of this before. To be an MS4, you've got these 6 minimum control measures, and they're all important. You've got public education, outreach, public participation, illicit discharge, a couple construction issues, and then municipal operations. Now we're moving forward on all of them, and they're all important. The publication and outreach, actually, Ms. Ritchie's done a lot on that. We kind of had a big jump on the website stuff when I got here. That was actually pretty good. And I've actually talked to a couple of staff at the school board. The municipal operations, I've actually talked to my brethren in Blacksburg, Christiansburg.
Sir, can you just speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And you're very soft-spoken, so it's hard to hear you a little bit.
And, they were really receptive to maybe some collaborative efforts. I think there may be some money savings in there because we all have to go through the same thing. Even though we have jurisdictional differences, some of the training for municipal employees and things like that, we can maybe execute some memorandums of understanding. But we've only started those conversations, and we're going to move forward with that, and we'll come, to you guys with those kind of things later on.
But and in the conversations I've had with the town managers, we all recognize it makes sense to be working together instead of reinventing the wheel 3 or 4 times.
Yes, sir. And actually, I think maybe they could help us out right now more than we could help them, to be honest with you. But, you know, we do cooperate with some of the training we do for employees. You know, we go to the transit system. It's Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Montgomery County employees, Radford employees, you know, all those guys. And even talk to the folks at Virginia Tech, because, you know, we're very involved in what they do also. As a matter of fact, for the past few months, I've been very involved in tech projects. But when I look at these 6 measures, I look at them as 3 of them as more indirect, and 3 of them is more direct. The indirect are more like influencing people, disseminate information, educating, maybe getting them to change habits. The other 3 are more direct. They're kind of like an interception measure. They're a direct, you're stopping the pollution before it gets to the stream. And to me, that probably needs the more immediate attention. The other things are great, because if you change people's habits, then you don't have to worry about intercepting the pollution. But that's why I'm looking at the illicit discharge. We actually have 2 local programs now that we've actually been running for a while that are those direct type programs, the erosion sediment control. I was actually looking at that. I didn't realize that actually started 40 years ago. It just didn't sweep through the whole state, but it was adopted statewide back then. And that supports our MS-4, which is construction while it's going on. The next one is stormwater management, which supports MCM5. And the county began officially as a program administrator just last July. So we've kind of got those knocked down. There's probably some tweaking to do. We probably need to change our erosion control ordinance a little bit just to make it in line with references that we've got, because references have changed, state rule books have changed, and those things are kind of out of date. But they're basically running pretty good. So that leads us to our last direct one, which is illicit discharge detection and elimination. And from the photos, you can kind of see that's what we're talking about, actual direct pollution problems. I've got a couple of definitions here. No need to read through all this stuff. The definition given for illicit discharge, that's directly what we have in the ordinance. And that definition is the accepted regulatory definition. It's actually in accord with the Code of Federal Regulations. That's how they define it. So that's the right definition. It's actually being driven by the definition below that, which is the Virginia Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And that's where this all comes from. It's kind of coming down from the federal down to the state, and now as a locality, we're going to be a partner and actually acting as their on the ground people to actually try to eliminate pollution. And that's what this is about. Now, the examples of illicit discharges it's kind of common sense, but things like sewage, automotive, motor and equipment fluids, paints, organic solvents, PCBs, and a host of all other types of things. Things that probably that's not a good thing, just to dump down a storm drain. The allowable discharges, though, it's not going to cut out water line flushing, landscape irrigation, non-commercial car washing. Now, big commercial car wash, those guys are subject to some more standards. If you've got foundation drains, if you're like pumping out your sump, as long as it's not subject to raw sewage and things like that, it's not going to affect anything like that. I mean, it's basically what you would not want to have in your drinking water. Is basically what it is.
Question for you, you said non-commercial car washing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, they have to do something special?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. They have to collect their water, either have on-site treatment, or if they get a permit from the Public Service Authority, they can send it to their sanitary sewer system. Because there's so many phosphates and things, and then they have such a higher volume. And it's basically going into a drain, which means it's going directly to this drain, straight to some pipe somewhere. When you wash your car at your home, I mean, some homes with curb and gutter, it is going to go to the gutter and it's going to go directly to the storm drain. But it's not that much. And for people that don't have curb and gutter, it'll run off into the grass, and it kind of goes down into the grass. The pollutants are absorbed. It's nowhere near the impact. Some facilities, they'll actually recycle their water because it's worth it to them to actually pay to have the water recycled, to not have to pay a water bill. Actually, Roanoke County recycles their garbage truck wash water, which it's a pretty extensive system, but it seems to work for them. I mean, now, the more, like down in Chesapeake Bay, those people are a little more sensitive to those kind of things. Even if you had a group of cheerleaders that want to do a charity car wash,
Right.
they actually get a little nervous about that and tell them they have to do certain things. We're not at that level.
We're not there.
I mean, that's maybe one thing I come to with a theme here, is we're kind of on the outer edge of how things are moving out as the way I like to put it, as it moves upstream, as far as how we want to control pollution.
So, what you're saying is, for an example, soft cloth over here would need something special.
Yes.
But if the Christiansburg High School, the senior cheerleaders want to do a car wash at Dude's Foods for donations and stuff, they would be okay?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
That's a one-time event. That's not a,
Point of clarification for our viewers at home,
absolutely.
that might be watching, so they don't panic and say, we can't do a car wash anymore.
No. It's nothing like that. Maybe it was a bad idea to bring up Chesapeake Bay, but it is something that, we also have lower thresholds just for the amount of disturbance. In Chesapeake Bay, you have to have a permit if you disturb over 2,500 square feet, just as a matter of comparison. And another thing to keep in mind too, the ordinance itself, because it is part of the MS4, it only applies to the urbanized MS4 areas, so it's not county-wide. So I think you guys have seen these slides before too. So there's the whole county map. So you're just talking about the areas that are outlined in red there for Elliston, Christiansburg East, Christiansburg South, Plum Creek, Christiansburg North, Bellevue, Pepper's Ferry, Price's Fort, Blacksburg West, Blacksburg North, Blacksburg Central, Blacksburg South, and it's only in those kind of areas. Now, the one thing that it does present is that it also means that people aren't supposed to be getting rid of their household hazardous waste into the storm drains, okay? But there is an option. The Montgomery Regional Solid Waste Authority does accept household hazardous waste, and it's on their website. It's free. They do it on the third Saturday of each month. It's on their website. So it's not like you don't have any alternatives. So there is a place you can take, you have old paint, you have old solvents, anything like that, you can take it to those guys and they'll take care of it for you. And again, this right here, the ordinance itself is just an initial step. It's a tool that we'll need as we go forward to develop the complete program, because all those minimum standards, they each have their own best management practice. And so for this minimum control method, we're also going to map all the outfalls and storm sewer. We're going to have to develop policies and procedures for looking at these things, and actually having a screening program in the far future, actually to the point of taking samples of things just to see what things are during dry weather. And it's just like this little image down there. It says no dumping that drains to the stream. That image is actually from right outside the government center here, because we're in Christiansburg, and those guys have been in MS4 for about 12 years now. So this is the point where they are, and I see it's the point where Montgomery County will have to work towards going in the future. And I hope that helped. And is there any questions or comments?
Just further confused me.
Well, the big thing that Doug and I have talked about, and we want to make sure the board is aware of, is these aren't things that Doug's sitting downstairs dreaming up that we need to be doing. These are things that, as part of being an MS4 jurisdiction, we have to address. And just like on that last slide where he showed the little placard on the storm drain, if you walk through downtown Blacksburg or walk through downtown Christiansburg and look at their storm drains now, nearly every one of them have that on it. That's part of being an MS4. I was telling a story, it used to be a long time ago, people would change the oil in their vehicles and they'd just dump it in the field or dump it along the curb line, or they'd rinse out their paint cans. In these areas now, not only is that a bad idea, we will be adopting ordinances that prohibit that and have penalties for violating that.
Right, and this is just a first step. The DEQ gives us a little bit of time to develop these programs.
I'm glad that you came, because there's a number of people throughout our community who watches the rebroadcast of these programs and things, and every little bit that we can do to educate our citizens, I believe is a benefit not only to the county but to them. And so I know we were told about it, what, a couple years ago or something, and seems like, you know, when we're told about it, it's sort of forefront, but it gets in the background and you sort of forget all about it until looking at this is an illicit discharge ordinance, you know, so it brings it back up. So I'm sure that our citizens out in the community are doing the same thing. They're forgetting about it unless they apply for, I guess when they get a building permit or something like that, it might shock the conscience then, but other than that,
you know, just to clarify, this really wouldn't affect people getting single-family home projects. You know, when you have a larger project, especially if it's something that disturbs over 10,000 square feet and much more if it disturbs over an acre, those folks have to develop their own stormwater pollution prevention plan. It's one of the 3 parts of the stormwater management plan. You have erosion control, you have stormwater management, then you have the stormwater pollution prevention plan. And the stormwater pollution prevention plan basically is an illicit discharge prohibition. What we do, these contractors have to have a plan that they need to adhere to. They need to keep it on site the whole time and available, so that as they do construction, they cannot wash pollutants down into the storm drains, even concrete. You won't see it on a lot of big sites, I mean small sites rather, but on big sites you'll see these fellows, they actually have to have these tubs that they build with straw bale barriers to wash out the concrete, because there's a lot more pollutants and irritants in concrete than what you imagine. A long time ago it was kind of accepted to just dump the concrete everywhere, but as that builds up and you get into some concentrated urbanized areas, as the county I think is going to do, it starts to have an effect. And so those guys, their fuels, they have to have their fuels set aside a certain way, they have to have containment vessels and those kind of things, because they're a much bigger impact. And I think the DEQ doesn't want to be too onerous on the single family construction. So they're not really held to that kind of standard. You know, if they disturb over so much, we can ask them to sign an agreement in lieu of that says you're going to try your best. And then it's kind of like, well, if you want to do rooftop disinfection or some rain barrels and things like that, but you're not going to be held to the standard that the big developer is. And I hope moving forward with residential development, a lot of the stormwater stuff is going to be taken care of to the point where they're going to account for all the homes, all the driveways, and everything like that. So all the stormwater is done. And so when each house comes in, they don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think that'll be in the long run cheaper for everybody.
Is that any different from what if you're going to a subdivision with 5, 6, 7 houses in it, or you know, or the difference between that and one that's going to have 100?
Well, yes, it's more a matter of density. And when I say density, what I'm talking about, you can do designs that are economically or environmentally friendly or low impact designs, if you've heard of LID designs. And sometimes you can do LID designs, and what you do, you can cluster things, get the same amount of lot yield. But what happens is, for the same amount of lot yield, you have a lot less stormwater management monies to invest instead of some of the traditional development scenarios.
So holding ponds or whatever don't.
If it's a non-MS4 area, then some of the traditional holding ponds and things are still going to be acceptable.
They're perfectly viable.
Right.
That's not, no, they're perfectly viable. I mean, everything as far as like what used to be on the table is still on the table. It's sometimes just a matter of scale. It's better sometimes to do things all at once.
Okay.
Questions, comments? I hope sometime, probably in the future, that probably some educational type video or something could be done with our public information office, or something about stormwater, the definition, about, you know, some examples to where our citizens can understand what's going on. And is this where the rain tax comes in later on?
Well, we've talked several times. At some point in the future, we will be back before you to start talking about some of the costs that the county's going to have to incur, not only to enforce this, but also to maintain and regulate our own facilities. And at some point, either through either through some revenue source, whether it be real estate tax or whether it be some sort of user fee, which is what most of the communities are going with. We're going to have to address that. But that's for another day.
But it's in the future, right?
As an engineer, I'm notoriously uncreative, so whatever Ms. Ritchie could do would be a great help.
Marty.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could, the board is agreeable. When you come out of work session, we'd ask if you would authorize the advertising of the ordinance. And we'd have a public hearing on the ordinance at the June meeting, first June meeting, and then we'd ask for the board to adopt it at the second June meeting, and with the ordinance becoming effective July 1.
Okay, any further while we in work session before we go out? Okay, need a motion to go out of work session.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to go out of work session. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
5 to 6 minute break, and then we'll reconvene.
Sure.
Okay, let's reconvene. Now, we come out of work session, and do we need a motion to put these on?
Yes, sir. There's two items that you need to take action on from work session. One was what Marty mentioned as far as scheduling a public hearing for the first meeting in June.
We could add that to consent agenda.
Okay, we could add that to consent agenda.
Let's add consent
And the
agenda.
other one's an addendum
And
after the public address.
And the other one is an addendum related to the capital appropriation for the animal shelter that can be added under new business.
And you could do that all under one addendum, put one on new business and one on consent, if you want.
And while we're talking about the agenda, I guess if you have a question about something on the consent agenda,
you can take it off. Yeah.
I would just ask the voting machines to be pulled off the consent agenda. There's a couple of things I'd just like to ask some questions about.
Sure.
Yeah, but we're at public address.
Okay. We'll move on to our public address.
Well, you need to vote.
Oh, we need to.
Could I make a motion
Okay.
to add those two items to our agenda? The public hearing to the consent agenda and the funding for the animal shelter to new business.
Okay, go have a second.
Second.
Have a motion second to add these two items. The capital appropriations from animal care and the illicit, I guess, discharge ordinance.
Public hearing, yes.
Public hearing for that. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And we'll move on to public address. I have no one signed up to speak tonight, but if there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the board tonight, they can come forward, state their name and address, and you have 5 minutes to. Seeing no one coming forward, we will close our public address session, and we'll move to the addendum.
And we addressed that
We already did
previously.
it, yeah.
There's that, no addendum.
Okay, consent agenda.
I guess I would ask that the voting machines be taken out of consent agenda.
Okay. Any other items from anybody else? So we need a motion for the consent agenda for all the items except the voting machines.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on the consent agenda with the removal of the voting machines. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Is this the point where you talk about the...
I just had a couple of questions. We were using the funds from the general contingency funds, I believe, and we had talked about at our last meeting of potentially using one-time monies to pay for that. And I just wanted to ask, was that something? Am I misrecalling that?
No, we had actually talked about using one-time funds to cover that initially, but then when we looked at where we were in the fiscal year, we have, and I can't see the number on here, but we still had quite a bit of money left in general contingencies for the fiscal year.
Right. We normally use general contingencies for something, say a position comes up, it requires ongoing operating or something to that effect. But we're 6 weeks out from year end, and I think the balance in general is $344,000 and some change. And with that amount of money left, and given this did come up as something that was not planned, we just recommended you take it from general contingencies.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
And it gives you, and it also, when we have the discussion about one-time money in an upcoming session, it gives you a little bit more one-time money to work with.
Okay, thank you. I guess at this point in time, is that fall under new business now?
Yes, sir.
Pulls that.
Okay. And I guess can they take that up as their first item of new business? And
yeah, since it's fresh and everyone.
yeah. So
okay, we'll move on to new business, and we're taking up
voting machines.
Voting machines.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion second on the voting machines. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Chair Grant?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And the
Take that one next.
we can take up the capital.
Yes, you can. The next
Appropriation on the animal care and adoption center.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and second to, I guess it's the funding plan for the capital appropriation for the animal care and adoption center.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call the roll? Or is there any discussion before I move further?
I previously stated that, and I think Todd brought up one of the subjects that I was going to discuss about Franklin County. I understand the need for a new animal shelter. I've been out there numerous times, but again, I believe that the expense of it, by the time you talk about the land acquisition, is too great, and that we need to relook at the price range around $3 million instead of close to, by the time you talk about all the expenditures, close to $5 million.
And I would like to encourage the administration to please maybe look for ways to have a metal roof.
Oh, absolutely.
And do that for the animal shelter. I just want it to be a really good thing that lasts us for a long time. I would ask that be done. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank Supervisor Biggs for all the work that she's put in moving this to where this was. I have to say that when I started on the board and Mary started talking to me about it 3 years ago, I never thought we'd get here. So that the fact that we're here, I think, is a testament to both her and Carol and all the staffs and the volunteers' tireless effort in this regard for this $4.2 million project, which, again, hopefully we can look at this roof and maybe the cupola as well. But it's long overdue, and I'm happy to be able to support it.
Right. And I second what he said. Mary has worked long and hard along with Carol. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Mary.
Other comments?
I'd just like to thank Carol and the volunteers, and I think we would not be sitting here today if it had not been for all of the meetings we went to long ago over at Virginia Tech together, and all the discussions that we had, and it is long overdue. It is long overdue. And so I'm just really proud of our board for moving forward on this.
Yep.
Make a comment or two. All the things that Mary said I agree with, and we're probably from about 1 or 2 letters from being shut down over there at that place. And I've been there several times, and if you have a weak stomach, it'll make you sick. The odor and everything. And then I was over one time when it had rained and it had flooded. And I'm sitting there like, man, these dogs have to learn how to swim, and the workers too. But it's been a long journey, and I'm just so happy that we're here. But I'll be really happy when they maybe have a ribbon cutting or something along those lines, and to see it operational. We've had a motion and a second. Any other further discussion or comments? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Tuck?
No.
Mr. Gabriel?
Yes.
Mr. Creed?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 no.
Yay.
Thank you, guys.
I
Thanks.
don't think they believed that was going to happen. They want to stay here and witness it. Yeah. Okay, new business subject A. Virginia Department of Transportation 6-year road improvement plan for secondary roads.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on any of them? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject B, resolution to commemorate Ira D. Long, former member of the Board of Supervisors. Resolution of commemoration of Ira D. Long, former member of the Board of Supervisors.
And I guess, Marty, I want to make sure that I can vote on this.
You can vote on it.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, since it, in full disclosure, Uncle Ira is my great uncle, and I would like to move to pass this resolution.
And I'd like to second it.
Have a motion and a second. Any comments? I've probably known I guess Ira from, I guess in the 60s when he worked at the powder plant, when I went to work over at the powder plant. Matter of fact, we both worked in the water department. He was the union steward. If you had a problem right there, you could always go to Ira, and learn a whole lot from him.
Yeah?
Yeah. And well, it's wisdom that you learn from him. So, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject C, proclamation, May 2015 as Business Appreciation Month.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Aye.
7 ayes.
County Attorney's report.
The only report I have, it'd be a quick report, but if you looked at the, just to bring everyone up to speed a little bit, when you looked at the animal shelter project, there's a small parcel there that adjoins the land that we just purchased, that's going to house the project. Well, that particular property that the county owns is actually sitting in the town of Christiansburg. And so Craig's had discussions with Barry Helms about the town agreeing to let us put that small parcel out of the town jurisdiction and put it into the unincorporated part of the county in order to make the building and the stormwater and all the other requirements that we got to comply with a little bit easier to do. And so we'll be starting that process shortly. Right now we have a survey going on to survey that parcel. Once that survey, we'll send it to the town. I assume they'll agree to it. I'll draft a little boundary adjustment agreement that we'll have to bring to you to approve, and then we'll have to set up a public hearing and go through some of that. But it's a friendly boundary adjustment. It's actually one of the first ones we've ever done that it actually leaves the town.
Going the other way.
But anyway, just keep up. We're kind of working on that, and it should be coming up to you maybe in the next month or so to start the process.
Okay, County Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things. We've had a couple of very nice business items of interest over the last week or two. We had a ribbon cutting at Polymer Solutions out in the Falling Branch Corporate Center last week. That's a very nice facility, moved over from Blacksburg. They've got a lot of space in their building and are talking about expanding already as well. So it's nice to see them doing well, and glad to have them there. Also, at the RBTC Tech Night on Friday evening, that's a group that meets annually, and this is at the Hotel Roanoke to recognize the technology and innovation going on in our region and between Roanoke and Blacksburg. But it's amazing when the awards are given out every year. It seems like the Blacksburg, Montgomery County side of things does pretty well. So we're proud to be a part of that group, and a lot of good things going on with them. Also, as you saw today with the governor's announcement, Hubble Lighting is staying in Christiansburg, investing $6 million in their facility and creating 100 new jobs over the next couple of years. We're very, very pleased and proud that they have decided to stay here and look forward to working with them for a long time. Several of us attended the FERC scoping meeting that was held at Eastern Montgomery High School last week on Tuesday evening. Not really a lot of new ground brought forward at that meeting. A lot of discussion about concerns on impacts to properties. I wanted to mention to the board that we will have the representatives from the Mountain Valley Pipeline here at our next board meeting, which will be on Tuesday, May 26th. I'll try to get an email out either the end of this week or first of the next week. If there are any particular items that you want to make sure that they come prepared to address, let me know, and I'll try to give them a heads up so that they have as much information with them when they come as possible. But they will be here on Tuesday the 26th. And last thing, just to remind folks, the PDC annual meeting is this Wednesday in Floyd. I don't know how many of you are planning on attending, but it'll be a very informal event, casual attire, and they have a food truck rodeo that's going to provide the food. It will not be a formal program per se in terms of PowerPoints and sitting down and all that. It's mainly to encourage some good fellowship among elected officials in our region. So that's Wednesday at 6 in Floyd. So that's all I have, sir.
And we did ask for an additional 90 days, additional time on the scoping.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, that we did. It came up a couple of times during the FERC thing last week about Roanoke County had asked for additional time, and were others going to do the same. This board did adopt a resolution asking for additional meetings and additional time, and we've passed that on to, we filed that with FERC the same week that was adopted. It was either 1 or 2 meetings ago, I can't remember. And we'll be glad to follow that up with our legislative delegation as well, our federal legislative delegation, if that would help. But yes, we have already addressed that.
Well, several. I know it was requested at the FERC meeting by some of the speakers, and during that time, some people had asked me, says, well, is Montgomery County going to follow Roanoke County's lead and ask for additional time? And I knew that we had done something.
Yes,
and
sir.
for the purpose of those watching at home, just want to make it clear that we have requested
yes, sir.
an additional 90 days similar to Roanoke County.
And we filed that with FERC. Yes, sir.
With FERC. Okay. Supervisor Biggs.
We did have a lot of, people attending that meeting from our board and Mr. Meadows, so we were well represented, I think, for people to know. Okay, let me see. I was just going to comment that I did go to FurFest on Saturday for the last hour of it, and it looked like to me it was very successful, and the people that were there were having a good time. When I got there were still children and families there. It seemed to be very family oriented, lots of things to do, and games and food, and of course animals. And which leads me to again thank board members for their support of the animal shelter. I think that we're going to have something that we can be proud of and something that's going to last into the future, and it's just I still can't believe we actually did this tonight, because I just keep thinking I started talking about this 20 years ago. So, it's just really exciting to have this happen. And let's see, I think that was Superfest, and, oh yeah, the only other thing, are we going to work on a resolution for Henry Jablonski?
That's to bring up, I was
Yeah.
going to ask if.
Yeah, because he did that one for,
We will definitely have
I think that would
for-
mean a lot to his children. He always spoke so highly of his children, always interested in what they did, and always going to visit them, when they moved away and everything, so I think that would be really nice. And he gave so much to the museum. If it weren't for Henry Jablonski, I don't think the original money, and I could be misquoted here, but I'm thinking that the original amount that the board gave to the museum way, way back when, before I was ever on the board, was $10,000, and that was because Henry was really interested in getting that museum off to a good start. So he really did care about our county.
He worked in it for a long time.
Yeah, so it would be good. That's all.
Supervisor Perkins.
Well, everybody's already mentioned everything I wanted to mention, but I really do hope you'll take advantage of the PDC meeting on Wednesday, Hotel Floyd. It's 6 o'clock, to reiterate that, and it should be a very a good program. And then again on Monday, or last Tuesday rather, when we went to the Mountain Valley Pipeline hearing that FERC put on, there were so many people who wanted to address, and over again, it was involving property, safety, and the fact that it was just going to destroy the Preston Forest neighborhood too. So I hope they listen to us and that something can be done about how they want to put it through our county if they decide they just have to. So anyway, and I thank again Carol and everybody who was involved with the animal shelter.
Okay. Mr. Tuck.
Well, I was going to bring up Henry and then see if there was support on the board potentially. I noticed in his obituary talking about that he wanted a donation to the museum. And I know typically that we do as a board support the museum, and I didn't know if that was something that had ever been done before, but perhaps that from general contingencies we could put aside, say, $500 in additional funding for Henry in regards to that. And that was something that the board might consider doing. That would be something different, but again, that was something specific. I noticed in his obituary that he was asking for donations. Well, maybe we can honor him as a board by putting $500 in, but that's something to think about. Don't have to take up tonight necessarily, but in addition, and I went to the FERC meeting as well, along with Annette and Bill and Mary and Gary and Craig, and listened to a lot of good speakers with a lot of different concerns. I continue to have a lot of concerns about the pipeline. I do think that I don't believe that anything that this board can do can stop that pipeline if FERC determines that there's an economic benefit, and those economic benefits outweigh the environmental and cultural impacts that they're going to have. But I think that we might be able to influence which one of the routes that FERC selects out of the three that are being proposed, or four, I guess, they're technically being proposed. I'm planning on talking with Marty over the next week before or after that meeting, and we'll have a resolution at least looking at that. Now, I'm not saying I'll put it forward. I want to listen to what the EQT folks have to say. I've been disappointed twice. If they strike out again, if they swing again and miss, they're out as far as I'm concerned. But it's something that I think is important. I quote Bill on this one. It may not be something that is in my district, but it is something that affects all of us. And I think potentially could affect all of our districts, just about maybe except for Matt's, with the understanding that if it doesn't come out by a pipeline, it might be coming out by rail. And we continue to hear about the rail accidents and the explosions that are associated with moving natural gas or oil or gas and by that means. So other than that, that's it.
Supervisor Gable.
No report.
Mr. Creed.
Yes, I don't know who's in charge of picking up paper. We're still using the sheriff's department to pick up paper around. Cinnabar. It's
Trashy.
bad, trashy. So
I think the sheriff's department ran out of money for their overtime. I may be wrong.
Yeah, it don't come up till.
Well, I know they are no longer getting reimbursed from the state for the inmate crew, but let me check on that.
that's one that
Yeah, I agree. I was out there the other day too, yes.
looks pretty bad. Go there a couple times once. The other thing, have we laid when we put the Eastmont Elementary building into their Parks and Rec?
You mean the
Shaws, yeah, Shaws. Yeah, Shawsville Elementary, yes, sir.
Eastern Montgomery, although it's Eastern Montgomery. When he wants to get into it, we're trying to make them all sound like Eastern Montgomery anyway. They get along better that way.
Okay.
But anyhow, I know at one time we had enough money maybe coming to tear down the old building.
Yes, sir. We're working on getting. First step that we had to do is we have to do an asbestos survey, because before you tear it down, you have to identify any hazardous materials. So that's being done. I think it's being done as we speak. Once we get that, then we're going to put it out to bid for demolition. So it's moving along, but like a lot of stuff, not real fast.
Okie dokie, and that's all I had. Just those.
Mr. King.
I just got one short thing. On this Hubble deal, I'd like to tell Craig how much I appreciate what him and his staff done. And I know several people from the town of Christiansburg, everybody worked together. I mean, it's a funny thing, you know, you got all these people working around, then the politicians come out and take a pat on the back.
As long as they're here, as long as they stay here, we don't care who gets the credit.
Well,
That's right.
not,
And no disrespect to the governor or either one of us, but I'd like to shine a light on everybody that did work on it.
Thank you. Well,
Even in the town of Christiansburg, I appreciate what they did.
well, Brian, thank you. Brian and his staff, along with the town, stepped up big time. So
They
thank
did.
you.
And I appreciate that.
Okay, Mr.
Let me ask one more. The meet and greet or what it is in Floyd,
Yes.
is that something you can take someone else with you, or is it just for?
You can take some foot.
You gonna take me?
Well,
Yeah.
and I believe it was $35 per head, is that what I heard? Or not?
That's what I heard.
When it
35.
first came out, that's what I heard.
I'll have to check on that. I'm not sure.
I think it was 35 heads, what I seen.
Yeah, I think it was.
I mean, I think that's what that it said. I'm just trying to make sure that,
I mean, if you come, you always got plenty of money anyway, so why worry about it?
but I need to know how much of that I need to spend.
Be watching your emails in the morning. We'll find out.
I think it's fun.
I have something. Ms. Perkins, were you gonna tell them or remind them about the regional meeting, May 18th?
Well, I was, but I thought, well, we've got so many meetings going on. May I have a little more time?
Yes,
when we
ma'am.
get to that? We do have a regional, actually it's a VACO meeting. We're part of Region 10, and Ms. Biggs has been director for a good while, and now I am, along with Gary Tanner, who is from Appomattox area.
He's a nice guy.
He's a very nice guy. We're going to have it in Rocky Mount at, I'm not sure exactly what they call it. It's some big place in Rocky Mount, and it's on the 18th. It's from 7 to 9. It's in downtown Rocky Mount, wherever that is. No, but we'll find it, and maybe I can email you back what the building is. Also, it is a joint meeting with Region 11, which is the Roanoke region. and they will have people there. There will be people there from VACO, and we will be looking at some of the issues that are now in front of us as VACO members, to have some people there who will be discussing some of those issues which are important, I think, to us. So if you would like to go there, we would encourage you to do it. I know Ms. Biggs is going, and I'm going. And if anybody needs a ride or anything, you can always. I'd hate for you to have to ride my car because it looks like it's been in a demolition derby, but at any rate, we will be going to this meeting in Rocky Mount on Monday night, the 18th, trying to get there at 7 o'clock. That's about it. Anything you want to add, Mayor?
I just thought we should remind everyone.
Okay, I have a couple things. I guess the first thing that I heard about the Mountain Valley Pipeline was FERC would be coming in having a scoping meeting. But I'm going to tell you, I was not impressed with FERC. The FERC representatives down at Eastern Montgomery, and it's I think that there was over 115 or 20, maybe 120 or 25 speakers signed up, and about halfway through the meeting, what is it, about 40 of them had spoke?
I think the total got to speak was 60. I was 113, I think.
Yeah.
113 or 114. John Edwards was 111.
And then it's just like, you know, when I think it was at 10:30, 10 o'clock. I'm sorry.
It was 10:30 by the time.
10:30. It was, you know, it was gone. And and then seemed like the majority of the time was taken up by him reading all the rules and what it would be for. And I'm saying, like, darn, they could have passed this out.
20 minutes to a half an hour.
20 minutes to half an hour. And I'm saying, like, that's speaker's time. That could have been 10 additional speakers. But I was not impressed at all. And if that's what we're going to see or hear from FERC,
Get it.
pipeline's done. I mean, you know. If you want to. Yeah. And just another thing is that they said something about a compressor station in Montgomery County that was going to be in Montgomery County, and I think that the far question to ask when they come is where at in Montgomery County, that we should ask that question when the representatives come to give us an idea where that compressor station will be located in Montgomery County.
Well, they have very little areas that aren't
conducive for
to have such a compression station.
Unless they're going to change something or something.
Yeah, and then also next Monday, if I'm not mistaken, it's the 11th annual Law Enforcement Memorial Day that the sheriff conducts here.
5 o'clock.
And so I said that the public is invited. If you're home looking at this meeting at TV, please come out on Monday the 18th at 5 o'clock and support our law enforcement personnel and in honor of and in memory of the ones that we've lost. That's all I have. Anybody have anything else? Let's go home.